Learning the history of science from standard textbooks is honestly a lot like picking up a mystery novel, but you just skip the first 10 chapters.
Right, you just jump right to the end.
Exactly. You skip to the end and you pretend the detective figured everything out on page 200 without a single clue. You open the book and suddenly Isaac Newton is inventing calculus. Galileo has a telescope, and it's like, boom.
The scientific method just spontaneously appears out of nowhere.
Right, just materializes in Western Europe.
It creates a very comforting, very linear narrative if you're reading that specific textbook. But reading history that way, it completely bypasses thousands of years of intellectual heavy lifting.
Oh,
all the empirical evidence, the massive technological leaps made by the rest of the world, it just gets erased. It basically hands you the final conclusion of this massive global investigation while, hiding the actual detective work.
Which is exactly why we are unpacking that specific narrative today. So, in this deep dive, our mission for you listening is to sort of decompose and distill the true global origins of modern science.
And we have some incredible source material for this.
We do. We are pulling heavily from a really comprehensive academic article on comparative civilizational history, and it's titled The Journey of Knowledge From East to West, Erased Traces.
It's a fascinating paper.
It really is, because when you look closely at the sources we're examining today, you realize that the foundations we use every single day, the numbers, medicine, astronomy, they have these deep, largely uncredited roots in Eastern civilizations.
Yeah, and to really understand how this knowledge was transferred to the West and, fundamentally rebranded in many cases, we have to start by looking at what was actually happening in the East.
Right, we have to look at the mechanics of the stuff we still unconsciously rely on today.
Exactly. So let's start with something literally every single person listening to this has looked at today, which is a clock.
Oh yeah, the base 60 thing.
Right, we divide a minute into 60 seconds and an hour into 60 minutes, and if you draw a circle, it's 360 degrees.
Which feels like a universal law of nature, but it's not.
Not at all. That base 60 system comes directly from the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia. They used a sex-adjustable math system. But I think what gets lost in the trivia there is the actual why. Like, why base 60?
Yeah, why not base 10 like we use for everything else?
It actually comes down to practical divisibility. If you're an ancient society and you're trying to manage complex trade networks or divide plots of agricultural land or map out the stars, you need a system that handles fractions cleanly.
Ah, that makes sense.
Right, because the number 60 is highly composite. You can divide it evenly by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30.
Wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Try doing complex fractions with our base 10 system without a calculator, and you just end up with really messy decimals.
Exactly. So base 60 was this incredibly sophisticated mathematical tool for its time.
And they were doing some pretty serious geometry with it, too. The sources highlight this Babylonian clay tablet dating back to around 1900 BCE called Plimpton 322.
Oh, that tablet is mind-blowing.
It really is. It lists Pythagorean triples, which for anyone who hasn't taken geometry in a while, that's the a squared plus b squared equals c squared rule for right triangles, like the 3, 4, 5 triangle.
Right.
But this tablet is listing these mathematical solutions 1,500 years before Pythagoras was even born.
Which tells us they weren't just, stumbling into good engineering.
Mm-hmm.
They'd actually formalized the abstract mathematical proofs required to build complex structures.
Yeah.
And you actually see that same transition from theoretical to highly practical applications in early Egyptian medicine too.
Yes. The Edwin Smith papyrus. This one completely shifted my perspective because usually pop culture paints ancient medicine as this mix of magic spells and herbal guesses.
Just kind of throwing mud at the wall and praying.
Exactly. Just mystical rituals. But this papyrus, which is from around 1600 BCE, it reads like a modern clinical trauma manual.
It really does. The structure of the Edwin Smith papyrus is what makes it such a watershed moment in human history.
Mm-hmm.
It contains 48 distinct medical cases.
Mm-hmm.
And each case follows a really rigid, rational procedure. It goes title, examination, diagnosis, and treatment.
Wow.
And it is entirely devoid of magical thinking. The physician is just observing the patient, noting the symptoms, and making a logical prognosis based on empirical data.
And the anatomical mechanics they documented are incredibly specific. I mean, they weren't just setting broken arms.
Oh, no.
This text includes the earliest known written descriptions of the brain's surface, the meninges, the cerebrospinal fluid.
Mm-hmm.
They were documenting what happens to the body when the brain or spine is injured.
Making those vital connections between neurological trauma and physical paralysis.
Yes. which requires this intense, just dedication to rational observation. And you see that exact same systemic precision applied to their engineering, like the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built with a base precision of 2.1 centimeters. You cannot quarry, transport, and perfectly align 2.3 million stone blocks.
Each weighing over 2 tons, by the way.
Exactly. 2 tons each with a 2.1 centimeter margin of error just using guesswork. It requires an absolute mastery of logistics, applied geometry, and structural engineering.
It does. And I want to bridge this physical engineering to the sort of conceptual leaps happening even further east.
Yeah.
Because we've all been taught the standard timeline, right?
Yeah.
Gutenberg invents the printing press in the 1450s. Columbus launches the Age of Discovery in the 1490s.
The classic textbook milestone.
Right. But the sources show a completely different functional timeline happening in China.
And the four great inventions.
Exactly. Chinese civilization essentially laid the groundwork for both the information age and global exploration centuries earlier through paper, printing, gunpowder, and the compass.
Right.
Take printing, for example. We always credit Gutenberg, but a Chinese artisan named Bi Sheng actually invented movable type printing around the year 1040.
Wait, 1040?
Yeah, he engineered a system using baked clay characters that could be assembled, inked, and disassembled for reuse 4 centuries before the Gutenberg Bible.
That is incredible. And regarding exploration, the paper talks about the Chinese fleets under Admiral Zheng He. They were navigating the globe decades before Columbus.
And not in little wooden boats either.
No. These weren't small exploratory vessels. They were constructing massive treasure ships with advanced compartmentalized hulls, which is a mechanism that prevents the whole ship from sinking if just one section gets breached.
A huge leap in naval engineering.
Yeah, and they were functionally 5 times the size of Columbus's Santa Maria, just operating on a completely different scale.
That scale of achievement really forces us to redefine what we mean when we use the word discovery. But perhaps the most profound leap we need to unpack didn't involve moving physical objects at all. It involved altering how humans conceptualize the universe itself.
Okay, we are going to India for this one.
We are. We're talking about the concept of zero. And I really want to pause here because it's so easy to just say, oh, they invented zero and move on.
Right, like it's just a blank space.
But zero isn't just a blank space. The intellectual hurdle of zero is massive. It is the difference between a simple placeholder and a functional number.
How so?
Well, before the Indian mathematical tradition, other cultures, including the Babylonians, they had ways to represent an empty column in an abacus. You know, a blank space to show the difference between 1, 10, and 100.
Sure.
But in the 7th century, the Indian mathematician Brahmagupta did something entirely different. He mathematically formulated zero as a distinct entity with its own operational rules.
He actually wrote out the mechanics of nothing.
Yes. A number minus itself equals 0. A number multiplied by 0 is 0.
Those rules seem so obvious to us now.
They do, but defining nothing as a value that can be manipulated in an equation, that is the bedrock of modern mathematics. Without that conceptual leap, you literally cannot have modern algebra.
Right.
You cannot have calculus, which relies entirely on the concept of limits approaching 0. Our entire modern technological framework rests on that 7th century abstraction from India.
That's wild. And the text also mentions Indian scholars like Aryabhata, right?
Yes, who was using advanced mathematics to calculate pi to astonishing accuracy. And he proposed that the Earth rotated on its axis a full 1,000 years before Copernicus published his heliocentric model.
Which brings up a massive irony that the source text highlights. The numbers we use to write those very equations today, they are universally called Arabic numerals.
Right.
But they are actually Hindu Arabic in origin. The Arab world recognized the brilliance of the Indian system, adopted it, and then it eventually passed into Europe.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at all of this, the 60 base math, the medical manuals, the movable type, the invention of zero, and I just have to ask a structural question here.
Go for it.
How does something as fundamental as the foundational logic of our daily lives become so entirely detached from the cultures that created it?
To answer that, we have to look at the physical movement of this knowledge and a historical mechanism the text refers to as the names erased phenomenon.
Names erase phenomenon.
Right. When knowledge moves from east to west, it didn't just passively drift over. It was filtered, translated, and fundamentally rebranded.
So how did that physical transfer actually happen, like on the ground?
The primary mechanisms were these huge translation hubs that sprang up in the 12th century, most notably in places like Toledo, Spain.
Okay.
After Toledo fell under Christian control, it became this intellectual gold mine. European scholars traveled there specifically to translate the vast accumulated libraries of Arabic texts into Latin.
Ah, so translating everything.
We are talking about massive synthesis projects. They combine Greek, Indian, Persian, and Arabic traditions into a format the European world could actually consume.
But the translation wasn't just about the science, right? It altered the identity of the scientists themselves. They Latinized the names.
They did. For example, the great polymath Ibn Sina, he wrote a medical encyclopedia that served as the standard textbook in European universities for 700 years.
Yeah, 700 years.
Yeah. But in Latin, he simply became Avicenna. And the brilliant philosopher Ibn Rushd, he became Averroes.
The one that really stuck with me from the text was the Central Asian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi.
Yes.
He was the scholar who literally formalized algebra. But when his works were translated into Latin, his name was rendered as algorithmy.
And that is exactly where we get the modern word algorithm.
Wow.
Every time you discuss a computer algorithm today, you're speaking a Latinized version of a 9th century mathematician's name.
That's incredible.
And as these texts circulated through Europe under these newly minted Latin names, they just gradually ceased to be viewed as Eastern knowledge. They were assimilated seamlessly into the European intellectual tradition.
I sort of like to think of it through a modern tech lens. It's essentially like someone taking a brilliant piece of open source software, changing all the author credits and variable names from Arabic to Latin, stripping out the original copyright, and then eventually winning a Nobel Prize for writing the code.
That is a perfect analogy. And the text points out that in some cases, it wasn't just a sort of innocent byproduct of translation. There are heavily documented cases of uncredited plagiarism by the literal titans of Western science.
Okay, let's look at Nicholas Copernicus because this blew my mind.
Oh, this is a huge one. Nicholas Copernicus is widely celebrated as the father of the scientific revolution, right? For his heliocentric model, proving the Earth orbits the sun.
Right.
But proving that mathematically was incredibly difficult. In his famous 1543 book, De Revolutionibus, Copernicus utilized a very specific geometric mechanism to model the planetary motions. And today, that mechanism is known as the Tusi couple.
And I want to make sure we understand the mechanics of this because it's so brilliant. Before this, astronomers who are using the old Ptolemaic system, they had to use these clunky mathematical workarounds.
Very clunky.
Assuming planets sped up and slowed down, which violated their belief in perfect, uniform circular motion.
Right.
But the Tusi couple solved this by basically placing a smaller circle inside a larger circle. As the smaller circle rolls around the inside, a point on its edge traces a perfectly straight line.
It is brilliant. It mathematically converts two circular motions into linear motion.
Yes. And that geometric proof was the missing key Copernicus needed to make his planetary models work.
But here's the problem. That mechanism was invented by Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, an Islamic astronomer, in the year 1261.
Nearly 300 years before Copernicus published his book.
Exactly.
And the smoking gun here is the diagrams, right? That's what the text said.
Yes. Historical analysis of the original manuscripts reveals that Copernicus didn't just use the mathematical concept, he used the exact same diagrams.
Oh.
He even used the identical alphabetic lettering at the specific geometric points that Tusi used in his original Arabic manuscripts. Yet Copernicus included 0 citations or acknowledgments of Tusi's work.
He literally copied the homework and put his name on it.
He really did.
And the text notes a similar situation with William Harvey. You know, every Western biology textbook credits Harvey with discovering the circulation of blood through the lungs in 1628.
Right. But the physiological mechanics of pulmonary circulation, the exact route the blood takes from the right ventricle through the lungs to become oxygenated and back to the left ventricle that was fully mapped out and described by the Syrian physician Ibn al-Nafis in 1242.
4 centuries before Harvey's big discovery.
The knowledge was translated, it circulated through European medical schools, and then it was magically discovered by a European.
It's staggering. And the source mentions this rebranding even extends to things completely outside of the hard sciences too, like sports.
Oh, yeah.
We always associate polo and football with elite British origins. But the mechanics of those games, polo and a ball kicking game called tepuk, they originated as ancient Turkic steppe sports.
Right, they were functional tools.
Exactly, used by nomadic communities for cavalry training and social bonding long before they were formalized on English boarding school lawns.
So the deeper question this all points to is structural.
Yeah.
If Eastern civilizations were mathematically, medically, and technologically dominant for millennia, why is the universal default assumption today that science is a uniquely Western invention.
Right. Because I'm looking at these timelines and the gap between the reality and the narrative is just massive. How did that narrative become so deeply entrenched?
To understand that shift, the article relies on the framework of Edward Said's concept of Orientalism and its counterpart, Occidentalism.
Okay, let's define those.
Sure. This is really about the politics of knowledge over the last 2 centuries. According to Said, Orientalism is the practice by which the West constructed a very specific, deliberate narrative about the East to justify colonial dominance. The mechanism was framing the East as static, mystical, emotional, and trapped in antiquity. It was presented as a land of ancient ruins and folklore, not a place of active, rigorous scientific inquiry.
And Occidentalism is the flip side of that mirror. Right.
Exactly.
It's the West framing itself as inherently dynamic, rational, and representing the ultimate universal standard for human progress.
But that philosophical framing alone wasn't quite enough to change the global narrative. The Industrial Revolution provided the real structural shift
So,
because it intimately linked scientific discovery to manufacturing, capital, and institutional power. The West didn't just study science, they weaponized it for mass production and global expansion.
okay, I want to push back here for a second, though, because I can hear the listener wondering this as well. We are talking about narrative framing and uncredited borrowing, but the European scientific revolution wasn't just a PR campaign, right?
No.
Like, Newton actually did invent calculus. Galileo actually did make massive observational breakthroughs. Is the source arguing that Western science is basically a hoax?
Not at all. And that is a crucial distinction to make. The text is absolutely not arguing that Western scientists were frauds who just copied ancient texts all day.
Okay, good.
The West did synthesize this imported knowledge, and they absolutely advanced it in revolutionary ways. The false narrative isn't that the West practiced science. The false narrative is the claim that the West built modern science independently, from scratch,
I see.
relying solely on the ancient Greeks and their own unique rationality, while completely ignoring the massive foundational bridges built by the rest of the world.
Right. So the issue isn't the final product, it's the systemic erasure of all the stepping stones that got them there.
Exactly. And the text points out that this erasure wasn't an accident. It was heavily enforced during the era of colonialism through a mechanism called epistemic violence.
Epistemic violence.
Right, which goes beyond physical conquest. It is the active, deliberate suppression and dismantling of local knowledge systems by a dominant power. When colonial powers took control of a region, they didn't just extract resources, they actively re-engineered the educational reality.
And the article highlights a really shocking example of this, Thomas Macaulay's decree in India in 1835.
Oh, the arrogance of that decree is astounding.
It really is. He essentially stated that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the entire native literature of India and Arabia.
Just unbelievable.
And that wasn't just an insult, it became policy.
It did. And that policy had functional mechanisms. Based on that deeply flawed assumption of superiority, the British defunded local indigenous educational institutions.
They just shut him down.
Yeah, and they replaced them with Western curriculums designed to train administrators, not scientists. When you systemically remove a culture's mathematical and scientific achievements from the curriculum, you inherently teach the colonized population that their history contains no science.
Just myth.
Exactly, only myth.
You completely sever their cultural connection to their own legacy. And, the truly frustrating part of this deep dive is realizing that this attrition isn't just historical. It's not just in the past.
No, not at all.
The source points out that this dynamic is structural, and it is happening right now in the modern academic citation economy.
Right. It operates today as a form of systemic gatekeeping. In the modern scientific community, for a discovery to be considered truly global or scientifically valid, it almost exclusively has to be published in high-impact English language journals.
Like Nature or Science.
Exactly.
So the mechanism of validation is heavily controlled.
Entirely. The editorial boards, the peer review networks, the major funding institutions, and the citation indexes, they are overwhelmingly concentrated in the West.
Right.
If you are a brilliant researcher publishing in another language, or if you are framing your research outside of Western theoretical paradigms, you are often just filtered out of the global loop. The modern knowledge economy heavily tilts the playing field, ensuring that the final stamp of approval on human discovery remains in Western hands.
Which really brings us to the core takeaway of this deep dive. Human knowledge isn't a relay race where one culture drops the baton and another picks it up.
No, it's not.
It is a deeply collaborative global inheritance. Acknowledging that a Sumerian mathematician developed the base 60 system or that an Indian scholar formalized the mechanics of zero, it doesn't diminish Isaac Newton's calculus at all.
Not one bit.
It actually makes the story of human progress make sense. It fills in those missing chapters of the mystery novel we talked about at the beginning.
It restores the integrity of the empirical record. Because science was never a solitary European genius sitting under an apple tree having an epiphany.
Right.
It is and always has been this unbroken chain of human curiosity and iteration, stretching across continents and millennia.
Absolutely. But there's a final, actually rather provocative thought from the source material that we want to leave you with today. We've spent a lot of time discussing how historical erasure happened through the Latinization of names and uncredited copying in textbooks centuries ago. But the source points out a modern equivalent of this happening right now.
And it's called biopiracy.
Biopiracy.
Right. Biopiracy is where the mechanics of erasure basically repeat themselves, but this time in the realm of modern intellectual property law. We are seeing Western pharmaceutical and agricultural corporations frequently attempting to patent traditional Eastern biological knowledge.
So they're looking at indigenous practices, isolating the active mechanism, and claiming they invented it.
Exactly. We've seen aggressive patent filings in Western offices for the medicinal and pesticide properties of the Indian neem tree.
Oh, wow.
Which is something that has been actively documented and used in Ayurvedic medicine for literally centuries.
Decades before they filed anything.
Centuries. And we've seen similar attempts to patent the antiseptic uses of Chinese turmeric. They are using the legal framework of the West to claim ownership over ancient communal knowledge.
It's the exact same phenomenon as Latinizing an Arabic scholar's name, just updated for corporate law.
Precisely.
So the question we really want to leave you to ponder today is this. If we don't actively acknowledge, teach, and protect the global collaborative roots of our historical knowledge, who gets to legally and culturally own the scientific discoveries of the future?
Because if the intellectual heritage of the past is treated as a free, uncredited resource for the taking, then the future of global knowledge equity is incredibly fragile.
It really forces you to reconsider the structure of everything you've been taught. The next time you look at a clock or run a computer algorithm or read a standard textbook, remember, you are holding a mystery novel. And now, at least, you know who actually wrote the first 10 chapters.